What did a 9-year-old prodigy reveal about CERN's experiments? And why did his shocking claim about switching universes in 2012 leave Joe Rogan completely silent? From mind-bending physics to eerie Mandela Effect coincidences, every revelation challenges what we thought we knew about reality. Stay with us, because what Max Laughlin said on that podcast will make you question the universe itself. The silence that shook the studio. The room fell into an unexpected stillness. Joe Rogan, known for his booming laugh that could fill a theater, froze mid-chuckle, his gaze locked on a boy who looked barely 10. Max Laughlin had just made a statement so precise, so undeniably observant, that it carried a weight no adult had dared voice. The effect was immediate. Seasoned skeptics, scientists, and podcast veterans alike felt a subtle tension in the air, a silent acknowledgement that something extraordinary had just been spoken. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was curiosity, mixed with disbelief. Max's words did not stumble or meander. They struck at the edges of reality itself, challenging assumptions that had been considered unshakable. Listeners describe a strange sensation, as if their understanding of the universe had been nudged ever so slightly off axis. Rogan's reaction was almost a physical cue, a pause that betrayed both fascination and unease. People who had encountered anomalies before admitted later that the clarity in Max's delivery was unlike anything they had experienced. In the immediate aftermath, the silence became a lens for observation. Every micro-expression, every hesitant breath seemed amplified in importance. Rogan leaned forward, scanning Max for any sign that the boy was exaggerating or performing. There was none. Each sentence Max delivered was filled with certainty, a conviction so rare that even seasoned professionals could not dismiss it. For the audience, the moment felt historic, as though they were witnessing a hinge point where ordinary perception collided with extraordinary possibility. Listeners recall a peculiar phenomenon in the studio. Time seemed to stretch. Moments that would normally slip by unnoticed became hyper-defined. The hum of equipment, the shifting chairs, the faint scratching of pens, all were etched sharply into consciousness. Some later theorized that this sensation wasn't psychological alone, but hinted at the same type of subtle temporal anomaly Max would later describe in his research. Whether coincidence or cosmic relevance, the experience left everyone present acutely aware that something unusual had occurred. Rogan's usual arsenal of humor and distraction was ineffective. The boy's calm articulation of complex concepts left no room for jokes. Even off-the-cuff questions intended to lighten the mood served only to highlight Max's prodigious knowledge. He spoke of dimensions and energy states in ways that defied traditional schooling, yet resonated with an innate understanding of the universe's underlying mechanics. Listeners were struck not only by what he said, but by how he said it. Measured, deliberate, impossibly clear. A surprising detail emerged in the days following the recording. Analysts reviewing the podcast noted subtle inconsistencies in the audience's memory of the discussion. Some recalled jokes that never happened, while others remembered a more intense emphasis on Max's warnings. The Mandela Effect would later provide a framework to understand this, but in that moment, the confusion added a layer of eeriness. Reality itself seemed to shift, if only slightly in response to Max's words. By the end of the session, Rogan's composure returned, but the atmosphere had changed irrevocably. Guests admitted they felt a new lens had been applied to the world around them, a sharper, more questioning perspective that lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. Max had done more than impress a studio audience. He had subtly altered how they perceived the boundaries of knowledge and truth. What had just been spoken was simple on the surface, but seismic in its implications. How could a child articulate such clarity on subjects that had baffled trained scientists? And more importantly, what did it mean for the universe as we thought we knew it? Stay with us as the mystery deepens. Max Laughlin, the mind that sees beyond. The pause in the studio was only the beginning. Beyond the lights, cameras, and microphones, Max Laughlin's world was operating on an entirely different frequency. While most children played with toys or chased curiosity in simple bursts, Max's mind moved through layers of reality like a cartographer charting unseen continents. By age 7, he was already tinkering with concepts that even graduate students struggled to comprehend, modeling energy fields and theorizing about temporal distortions as if they were ordinary building blocks. What set Max apart was not just knowledge but perception. He noticed anomalies that adults dismissed, subtle patterns in nature, recurring coincidences in physics experiments, and even the way people unconsciously mirrored reality in their memories. These weren't ideas he read in books. They were observations pulled from the edges of awareness, details most would glance past. Teachers described him as distracted, unaware that he was absorbing layers of information that would take decades for others to decipher. By the time he first visited a laboratory, Max demonstrated an intuition for mechanics and mathematics that stunned engineers. He could visualize particle collisions in 3 dimensions without software, predicting outcomes with uncanny accuracy. Colleagues at research centers recall watching the boy sketch diagrams that no adult had yet conceived. One physicist admitted later that Max's ability to detect unseen forces made him feel like he was watching the universe itself, whisper secrets through the child's hands. Max's curiosity wasn't limited to theory. He invented devices meant to measure phenomena beyond conventional sensors. Early prototypes included instruments designed to detect microfluctuations in electromagnetic fields and record subtle variations in time perception. Each project revealed not only technical skill, but a profound understanding of how reality could be probed and quantified. It was as though he instinctively knew what experiments humans had yet to imagine, reaching into the gaps where conventional science had not ventured. Friends and family noticed that Max experienced the world differently. While other children were engrossed in games, he would pause mid-step, staring at ordinary objects as if reading the energy woven into them. He asked questions that seemed simple on the surface but carried implications that were unsettling in their depth. Why does memory feel like a river we can never step into twice? Why do patterns repeat when they shouldn't? Why does time sometimes appear to stretch or compress? Adults around him found themselves stammering for answers, realizing that Max's understanding of causality and perception exceeded what they had been taught. A defining moment occurred during a quiet summer evening when Max sat outside observing clouds. He described their movements not in shapes or colors, but as energy flows interacting with gravity and atmospheric particles. By the end of the hour, he had sketched a series of diagrams mapping invisible forces, which he later admitted were just small glimpses of what the universe is doing all the time. It wasn't arrogance, it was certainty. Max had trained his senses to read reality in ways most humans ignore entirely. By now, the audience that first heard him on Rogan's podcast could begin to understand why his claims about 2012 resonated. Max did not speak from imagination or hearsay. He spoke from a vantage point that most people never knew existed, from a mind that processed the universe as a living, shifting system. Observers often describe the experience as unnerving, because it forced a confrontation with the limits of human perception and the fragility of accepted reality. The question that hung in the air was no longer about his genius. It was about the implications of it. If a child could notice the cracks and folds of the universe before the rest of humanity, what unseen events might he have detected that could change everything? Come with us to explore the hidden corners of the story. The Collider, humanity's most ambitious experiment. Max's awareness of the universe naturally drew him toward the machine that had fascinated generations of physicists, the Large Hadron Collider. Located deep beneath the French-Swiss border, this monumental ring of superconducting magnets stretches 27 kilometers, a labyrinth designed to accelerate particles to near-light speed. Most saw it as a tool, a modern monument to human curiosity. Max saw it as a heartbeat of the cosmos, a place where the fabric of reality itself could be tested. Constructing the collider took decades and billions of dollars, yet the scale barely hints at its purpose. Inside its tunnels, protons race through a vacuum colder than outer space, colliding with energies that mimic conditions a fraction of a second after the Big Bang. Scientists study the debris of these collisions to understand matter's fundamental building blocks. But for someone like Max, These weren't just experiments. They were portals to phenomena that defied ordinary perception. Arenas where the universe might reveal secrets too subtle for most to notice. The collider's sheer complexity is staggering. It contains thousands of magnets, cryogenic systems to maintain temperatures near absolute zero, and detectors designed to capture fleeting particle traces that last less than a trillionth of a second. Engineers describe moments of operating the collider as listening to the whispers of creation. For Max, it wasn't metaphor, it was literal. He could feel patterns in the collisions, subtle irregularities in energy flow that suggested something extraordinary might be happening, something that went unnoticed by even the most meticulous scientists. Its first runs were heralded as technical triumphs, producing results that confirmed decades of theoretical physics. Yet anomalies appeared almost immediately, slight asymmetries in decay patterns, energy spikes that had no clear origin, and unexplainable deviations in particle behavior. While the media reported these as minor glitches or calibration errors, Max's observations hinted at something far more profound. He suspected that the collider was doing more than revealing particles. It might be nudging reality itself. Scientists remain divided. Some dismiss the notion entirely, focusing on measurable outputs and repeatable experiments. Others, secretly intrigued, admit that certain data points resist conventional explanation. Max was not bound by disbelief or protocol. He saw correlations between these anomalies and patterns in time perception, memory inconsistencies, and what would later be called Mandela effects. The collider, in his mind, was a lever pulling at the edges of existence. Even more unsettling were the stories from technicians. A few reported subtle sensations, clocks behaving strangely, equipment showing readings that briefly contradicted physical laws, and a faint, almost imperceptible hum resonating through the tunnels. These details were never made public. Max, however, absorbed them, recognizing them as whispers, confirming what his intuition had long suspected. The machine might have done more than smash particles. It could have nudged the universe onto a different path. The collider's ambition from the outside was clear. Understand the birth of the universe, uncover the Higgs boson, and test the limits of physical law. From Max's perspective, its implications went further. It wasn't merely observing reality, it was interacting with it, creating a bridge between what is known and what is possible. Each collision, each invisible flash of energy, could ripple through dimensions, leaving traces that human senses could barely detect. And then came the moment Max couldn't ignore. Reviewing data from the 2012 collisions, he noticed patterns that hinted at a fundamental shift. These weren't just statistical quirks. They were markers, footprints, anomalies pointing to a universe that might have subtly changed, a change so profound that only a mind like his could perceive it. If the collider could touch reality in ways the world wasn't ready to understand, what had it truly unleashed? Let us guide you into what no one expected. The year the universe shifted. 2012 arrived quietly on the surface of the world. Life moved as usual, calendars turned, and the usual headlines filled newspapers. Yet, beneath the everyday, subtle tremors were stirring in the structure of reality itself. People reported strange phenomena, clocks seeming to stretch, days that felt unusually short, and memories of events that no longer aligned with records. Most shrugged these off as coincidence, but Max saw them as echoes, direct consequences of something far larger than anyone suspected. Unlike prior anomalies, the changes in 2012 were not isolated. They were global, invisible to cameras, yet palpable to human perception. Airline pilots described flight instruments acting erratically for seconds at a time. Seismologists noted minuscule but inexplicable shifts in Earth's magnetic field. And even amateur astronomers recorded star movements slightly askew from predictions. These were not signs of natural disasters or technical malfunctions. They were subtle fingerprints of a universe that was quietly recalibrating itself. Max became obsessed with connecting these dots. He noted that patterns emerging in 2012 correlated with the data anomalies from the collider. The energies unleashed in particle collisions didn't vanish. They seemed to interact with reality on a cosmic scale, nudging fundamental constants and slightly bending the flow of cause and effect. His understanding of time and probability allowed him to see connections invisible to most, revealing a hidden network of events that hinted at a radical, almost imperceptible shift in existence. Even stranger were personal experiences. People recalled events that had never happened, brands that had changed overnight, and objects remembered differently than their current forms. Mainstream science dismissed these stories as collective error, but Max cataloged them meticulously. He suspected that these occurrences weren't hallucinations, but the after-effects of a subtle reconfiguration, a ripple caused by human experiments reaching the edges of the possible. Financial markets reacted in ways no analyst could predict, sometimes reversing direction without cause. Global communications showed tiny but detectable delays, as if the flow of information itself had been altered. Even cultural touchstones appeared to drift. Music lyrics, movie lines, and iconic logos exhibited tiny shifts that millions would later debate online. Max observed these phenomena not as anomalies to be feared, but as evidence that the universe was no longer operating on its previous blueprint. For many, 2012 became a year of intuition and unease. Some felt life had accelerated, decisions were harder to make, and synchronicities occurred with uncanny frequency. Scientists and philosophers speculated about consciousness and perception, but no one could articulate the scale of what was happening. Max, however, had the advantage of foresight. He realized the collisions and anomalies were not isolated incidents, but part of a larger ongoing experiment that humans had inadvertently conducted. By mid-year, subtle patterns began to stabilize. People adjusted to the new normal, unaware that they had crossed an invisible threshold. Time's rhythm seemed consistent, yet a layer of reality had subtly shifted beneath it. Those attuned to perception noticed it immediately. For the rest, life continued without question. Max documented every clue, preparing for the moment when the true implications would emerge. As the year drew to a close, Max understood the gravity of what had occurred. The universe hadn't ended, nor had it rewritten entirely, but it had shifted in ways that would ripple through human perception for decades. Questions that had once seemed abstract now demanded urgent attention. If reality itself could be altered through experiments like the Collider, what safeguards existed to prevent further shifts? And what had humans truly unleashed in 2012 that no one was yet ready to comprehend? Stay with us as the secrets grow even darker. Ghosts in memory. After 2012, the world seemed unchanged on the surface, yet beneath ordinary life, subtle fractures in memory began to emerge. People remembered events differently, sometimes recalling conversations, logos, or media that no longer matched reality. These weren't isolated lapses. Millions reported the same discrepancies, creating a pattern impossible to ignore. Max observed these phenomena with a scientist's eye, recognizing that they were not errors of imagination, but markers of a universe slightly rewritten. The first striking examples appeared in entertainment. Classic movie lines were recalled in ways that contradicted film archives. Familiar characters wore costumes remembered differently, and even entire plots seemed shifted in collective memory. Fans debated endlessly online, insisting they remembered it clearly, while archivists and databases insisted otherwise. These inconsistencies became what the public would later call the Mandela Effect, named after widespread misremembering of Nelson Mandela's death date. But Max saw something more profound. These discrepancies weren't random. They were echoes of a reality that had subtly diverged from itself. Brands and logos became a particularly striking battleground for these memory anomalies. Global corporations discovered that iconic designs, long familiar, were suddenly misremembered by millions. Some reported that even internal files conflicted with public perception, suggesting that the universe itself had left faint traces of its prior state. Max cataloged these ghost logos as evidence that reality was not fixed. It was malleable, responsive to forces that humans had barely begun to understand. Everyday objects, too, seemed affected. People recalled streets, signs, and landmarks that no longer existed as they remembered them. Products were remembered in sizes, colors, or packaging that had subtly shifted. Max theorized that these changes were not perceptual tricks, but genuine indicators of the universe adjusting its own constants, leaving behind shadows of its prior configuration. Human memory, he realized, was a bridge linking these shifting realities, a fragile sensor recording the invisible waves of transformation. The phenomenon wasn't limited to material culture. Collective memory extended into events and experiences. Entire historical moments were recalled differently depending on the observer, creating conflicts between eyewitness testimony and documented history. Max noticed that patterns emerged, inconsistencies often centered around culturally significant touchpoints, suggesting that the universe's shifts targeted nodes of high attention. These weren't random glitches, they were footprints of a universe in motion, recorded in the minds of those sensitive enough to perceive them. Researchers who tried to measure the Mandela Effect often faced skepticism, dismissing it as faulty cognition. Yet Max recognized a deeper truth. What humans perceived as false memory was evidence of a reality that could exist in parallel states. Some memories belonged to a timeline that had been overwritten, leaving only fragments behind. Each person experiencing these ghost traces became, unknowingly, a witness to the subtle mechanics of a universe reconfiguring itself after the events of 2012. By observing these phenomena over time, Max uncovered a disturbing insight. The Mandela Effect was not just curiosity or coincidence. It was proof that the Collider's experiments had interacted with consciousness, leaving subtle, measurable impressions on human perception. It was a whisper from the universe, reminding anyone paying attention that reality was no longer a constant, but a variable, one that could shift in ways invisible, yet undeniable. The question that now haunted Max, and anyone attentive to these anomalies, was unavoidable. If memories themselves could betray the old reality, how could humanity be sure which world it truly inhabited? Come with us into the truth that was never meant to surface. The portal we can't see. After the Mandela Effect began to ripple across society, a deeper, more unsettling pattern emerged. Max observed that these shifts weren't simply anomalies in memory, they were markers of an invisible threshold, a portal not made of metal or light, but of reality itself bending. Unlike a door or a gateway, this portal was a state, a thin interface between what humanity knew and what existed just beyond perception. Every subtle anomaly, every ghost memory, was a hint that something fundamental had changed in the very architecture of the universe. Max described it as a space between spaces. It was not observable in the conventional sense. No camera could capture it, no sensor could measure it directly. Its presence was inferred, like gravity before it was understood, through effects on matter, consciousness, and probability. People attuned to the shift reported inexplicable sensations, brief lapses in time, flashes of déjà vu, and moments where reality seemed to waver, as if the ground beneath them was not entirely fixed. Ordinary experiences began to carry extraordinary implications. The portal, Max believed, was tied directly to human perception. Consciousness itself acted as both a lens and a sensor, registering minute changes in the universe. Those who were sensitive, scientists, observers, and a few children like Max, could detect shifts that others missed entirely. The Collider's energy had created a disturbance, a ripple that did not simply remain in subatomic particles, but extended into the network of human observation. It was a place where thought and reality intersected, a delicate interface that humans were only beginning to comprehend. Historical and cultural anomalies became more significant under this lens. Textbooks, archives, and recorded media all carried subtle inconsistencies. Max mapped these discrepancies and discovered patterns. They were not random but followed specific alignments, as if the universe were encoding its new state in the collective consciousness. Each anomaly served as a waypoint, guiding those perceptive enough toward an understanding of the portal's structure. What had once seemed like minor glitches were now messages, signals embedded in memory and observation. Even physical phenomena reflected the portal's influence. Natural cycles experienced tiny, almost imperceptible shifts. Seasonal patterns arrived slightly earlier or later than expected. Migration paths of birds diverged from historical trends, and atmospheric anomalies were recorded that defied existing meteorological models. Machines, too, occasionally registered improbable readings: magnetic fields that flickered, clocks that deviated by seconds, and sensors that reported energy fluctuations with no clear source. All of it hinted at a universe that had been nudged onto a new trajectory, one that humanity could observe but not yet fully control. Max's own experiments became increasingly sophisticated. He built devices to measure subtle temporal distortions, energy fluctuations, and microshifts in probability. These instruments confirmed his suspicion. The portal was active, dynamic, and unstable. The energy unleashed by the collider had not merely revealed it, it had partially created it, a bridge between the known universe and a dimension that operated under slightly different rules. The implications were staggering. Humanity's reach had extended into a domain that was never meant to be touched, one that might not be fully compatible with human cognition or survival. Communication and technology also bore the portal's subtle fingerprints. Data streams occasionally behaved unpredictably. Messages seemed delayed or misdirected, and digital memory sometimes contradicted human recollection. Economists, programmers, and engineers all reported anomalies they could not explain. Max theorized that this was the portal's way of interacting with structured human systems, reality itself leaving traces of its new architecture in both physical and informational networks. Max warned that humanity had encountered a subtle, reality-altering portal, a threshold where perception and probability intertwined. Reckless tampering could have unpredictable existential consequences, making careful observation essential. Though invisible, the portal quietly transformed reality, leaving faint traces in memories, measurements, and everyday life. Max and those attuned to it became witnesses to this ongoing shift, a silent reminder that curiosity could touch the very fabric of existence. Were you stunned by Max Laughlin's claims and the possibility that 2012 marked a universe-altering event? Share with us which moment made you question everything you thought was real.